Okay, let's dive right in. We have a stack of sources today that are, quite frankly, going to challenge a lot of assumptions.
But that's putting it mildly.
We are doing a deep dive into Surah al-Baqarah, specifically verses 46 through 48. And I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, okay, religious text versus theology, I know the drill.
Right. I've heard this before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But hold on, because the material we have in front of us today, I'm talking about lecture transcripts from G.A. Parwez
Yeah.
and these very dense, almost technical systems analysis documents. They completely flip the script.
You certainly do. It's a paradigm shift. It's jarring, actually, when you first read it. You expect a sermon, but what you get is a systems analysis.
A systems analysis, that's the perfect term for it. I mean, we're so used to hearing terms like Salah, which, usually gets translated as ritual prayer, or shafa'at, which is intercession. And we think of these as, I don't know, personal rituals or maybe spiritual safety nets. But the sources for today's deep dive, they frame these concepts in a way that feels less like theology and more like, well, like mechanical engineering or social sociology.
That's a very apt description. It's fascinating because the sources treat the Quran not just as a book of moral guidance in some vague abstract sense, but as a document of social sociology.
A blueprint.
A blueprint, exactly. They present it as a divine architecture. The argument isn't about performing rituals to please a deity in the sky. It's about a mechanical cause and effect system that dictates how entire civilizations rise and fall.
A divine architecture. I love that phrasing. It captures the tone perfectly. And looking at my notes here, the tone is so incredibly analytical. It's almost scientific.
It is.
The source material talks about claims and proofs about laws of nature. It's treating social behavior with the same kind of rigidity as physics. It's essentially saying that the laws governing society are just as hard and fast as the law of gravity.
Precisely. You can't negotiate with gravity, and the source argues you can't negotiate with these social laws either. And that's really the mission for us in this deep dive. We need to understand the specific methodology the text uses.
This claim and proof method.
Yes.
Yeah.
We aren't just looking at religious exhortations here. We're looking at a structured argument that says specific social behaviors like hoarding wealth or ignoring the needy inevitably lead to national humiliation. Not because of bad luck and not even because of punishment in the traditional sense, but because that's how the system is built.
And what really stands out to me reading through this is that the system is blind. It doesn't care who you are. The sources are so specific about this.
Oh, absolutely.
Just because you label yourself a believer or part of a so-called chosen nation, it doesn't buy you any immunity. If you violate the fundamental laws of this social architecture, the building collapses. Period.
It all comes back to this bigger picture of accountability. The text forces the listener, and us as we analyze it, to confront this idea that there are no shortcuts, there's no magic wand, there are no back doors.
It's all about the system.
Yeah.
So I think that's the perfect place to start. If you're ready, we should get into that foundational concept, the claim and the proof.
Let's do it.
All right, so section 1, the Quran's methodology. The source material highlights that the Quran doesn't just issue commands from on high. It constructs a very logical, almost legal argument. Can you walk us through that structure?
Yeah, it's quite striking. The source explains that the Quran repeatedly presents a claim, you could almost call it a hypothesis, and then immediately follows it with proof, historical proof.
So it's not just believe this because I said so.
No, not at all. It's here is a principle, and here is the data from human history that validates this principle.
Okay, so what is the central claim that we're talking about here?
The claim is this: a nation that organizes its collective life according to divine laws, what the text calls wahi, will inevitably achieve success, abundance, and even superiority. Conversely, any nation that violates these laws, that builds its society on other principles, will face humiliation and misery.
So the claim is basically follow the manual and the machine works beautifully. Ignore the manual and the machine will break down on you.
That's a great way to put it. That's the hypothesis. But of course, a hypothesis needs data to back it up. And the proof is where it gets really interesting historically.
Okay.
The source notes that the Quran points again and again to the history of Bani Israel, the Israelites, as the empirical evidence, the case study, if you will.
Why Bani Israel specifically? I mean, history is full of rising and falling empires. Why does the text focus so heavily on them as the primary case study?
That's a great question. The source explains that Bani Israel serves as the perfect case study because they represent both extremes of the spectrum. They are exhibit A for both success and failure under this system.
They've seen both sides of the coin.
Exactly. The text reminds them, and by extension the listener, that there was a time when they were granted faddle.
Faddle, that means preference or superiority, right?
Yes, superiority over their contemporaries. But, and this is the critical part of the analysis in our sources, this faddle wasn't magic. It wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't because of their genetics or because they were God's favorites in some kind of nepotistic sense.
It wasn't a title they were born with.
No, it was a direct result of the system. The source argues that when they upheld the divine laws of justice, economic fairness, social cohesion, they naturally rose above other nations that were governed by tyranny, by feudalism, by human exploitation. Their success was earned.
Okay, so their success was a direct result of their behavior, not their bloodline. This creates a very clear causal link. They implemented a specific social order, and the result was dominance and success.
Exactly. And then comes the twist. The second half of the proof. The source argues that when they abandoned the system, when they traded the difficult social responsibilities for empty, hollow rituals, they fell into humiliation.
The machine broke down.
The machine broke down. They became, as the source describes, a wretched people, persecuted, scattered, and powerless. So the argument is, look at this data point. Same people, different behavior, completely opposite results. This proves the claim. It proves that success is conditional. It is not inherent.
That is such a powerful way to look at history. It completely removes the mystique of being a chosen people. It's performance-based.
Entirely.
It's essentially the text saying, look, I gave you the blueprint, you built the house according to it, and it was the most magnificent structure in the world. Then you tore up the blueprint and started throwing mud at the walls, and the house fell down. Don't blame the ground, blame the construction.
And that leads to a very, very hard truth that the source emphasizes. It's about generational accountability.
Yes. This was a major point in the lecture transcript.
It was. The transcript explicitly states, past glory does not save a corrupt present generation.
Oof. That hits home. I feel like every nation, every culture, every religious group has this tendency to rest on its laurels. We think, well, our ancestors were great saints or great scholars or great pioneers, so we're good, we're safe.
It's the beloved nation delusion. It's a universal psychological crutch, isn't it? The source calls it out directly. It brings up verses where people of the past claimed we are the children of God or the fire will not touch us except for a few numbered days.
Right. They believe their lineage, their label, acts as a shield.
And the source completely dismantles this. It says that if a generation is corrupt, if they are unjust, if they hoard wealth, the piety of their forefathers is completely irrelevant. The law of requital, which we'll get to in much more detail later, doesn't look at your family tree. It looks at your actions. Right here, right now.
It's like being the child of a famous surgeon. Just because your dad saved thousands of lives doesn't mean you can just walk into an operating room and start cutting people open. You have to learn the skill yourself.
Precisely. The application of the law is personal and it's generational. You cannot inherit the reward without doing the work. The glory isn't transferable.
So if the claim is that following the law brings success, we really need to define what following the law actually looks like. And this brings us to section 2, which I think is probably the most mind-bending part of this entire stack of material. We need to talk about Salah.
We do, and we absolutely have to check our traditional definitions at the door for a moment to get what the source is arguing.
Right, because usually when people hear the word Salah, they immediately think of the ritual prayer performed 5 times a day. But the source zeroes in on a specific verse, Surah al-Baqarah, verse 45, which describes Salah as being kabira.
Kabira, huge, heavy, difficult, burdensome.
And the host in the lecture, G.A. Parwez, he poses this really provocative challenge to his audience. He asks, is performing a morning ritual actually difficult? Is it really that heavy?
It's a fantastic question. Think about it. If you are a devout person, or even just a disciplined person, is a ritual really that difficult? Parwez uses a counter-argument based on simple habit formation.
Yeah, I love this part.
He gives this incredible example of Hindu women who, as part of their religious observance, would go and bathe in freezing cold rivers before dawn, in the dead of winter.
Freezing.
He points out that they did this every single day in the bitter cold. Did they find it heavy? Did they struggle with it? No, it was a habit. It was part of their identity.
That's such a good point. I mean, you can look anywhere. Look at athletes. They wake up at 4 a.m. to train in punishing conditions. Once it's a habit, it's not a burden. It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday.
If you're used to waking up at 5 a.m. for a run, waking up at 5 a.m. isn't a heavy burden. It's just your routine. So if the Quran calls Salah difficult or heavy, It cannot simply be referring to the physical act of standing and bowing.
Exactly. The equation just doesn't balance. If the ritual isn't the heavy part, then Sala must be defined as something else entirely. And this is where the source offers its core argument. It defines Sala in this context as a comprehensive socio-political system.
A system, not just an action.
A system. It's a system designed to restrain human greed and regulate society for the benefit of all. And the source explicitly connects Sala to another very powerful concept found elsewhere in the Quran, the Aqaba.
The Aqaba, the mountain pass.
Yes.
The steep uphill climb.
Steep uphill climb. The source argues that establishing the system of Sala is one and the same as attempting to climb this mountain pass. And fortunately for us, the text defines exactly what climbing that pass entails.
And I'm guessing it's not about how long you can hold a yoga pose.
Not at all. The Quran is very specific. Climbing the Aqaba involves two main things. Freeing the neck, which means liberating humanity from every form of subjugation, be it slavery, debt, or political tyranny.
Okay, so that's number one. Freeing people.
Number one. And number two is feeding the hungry on a day of famine. That is what is Kabira. That is what is heavy.
Wow. Okay, let's just pause on that for a second. Freeing slaves and feeding people during a famine. That is objectively, measurably harder than performing a 5-minute ritual in a quiet, temperature-controlled room.
Infinitely harder.
It requires real sacrifice. It requires overturning entrenched economic structures. It requires you to challenge power.
It requires fighting against your own self-interest. It demands that you take wealth that you want to keep for yourself and give it to someone else who has no claim on you other than your shared humanity. That is a heavy lift. That is a steep, steep climb.
It really reframes the whole concept of difficulty in religion. We usually think the difficulty is in self-deprivation, fasting, waking up early. But this source says the real difficulty is in the giving, in the social responsibility.
Exactly. And this is where the source brings in those two critical terms, fasha and munkar. Now, you'll often hear these translated as lewdness or just generic bad deeds. But the source insists on a much more specific linguistic correction here.
This was another mind-blowing part for me.
It's a crucial correction for the whole argument. We usually associate the word fasha with sexual indecency or vulgarity. But the lecture notes that in this socioeconomic context, fasha is fundamentally defined as stinginess, avarice.
Stinginess.
Yes. It refers to tying the purse strings. It's the act of hoarding resources when they should be circulating to nourish the community.
So that's a massive shift in meaning. When the text says that the system of Salat prevents fasha, it means the system is designed to prevent the hoarding of wealth.
Precisely. And think about why hoarding might be considered lewd or obscene in this framework. If you have a society where people are starving, children are malnourished, and you have a warehouse full of grain that you are holding on to just to drive up the price and increase your profit, that is a social obscenity.
It's grotesque.
It is grotesque. The system of Salah is designed to prevent that specific obscenity.
Okay. And what about the other term, munkar?
Munkar is defined here as selfishness, disregarding the needs of others, and ignoring unrecognized rights. The source draws a sharp contrast here using the concept of ma'un from another chapter. It contrasts the muselin, who are the true upholders of the system of Salah, with those who commit ma'un.
And what is ma'un?
Ma'un is described as refusing small kindnesses, hoarding basic necessities, or preventing resources from flowing to the needy. It's the opposite of a cooperative society.
So let's put this all together. If I am performing the ritual prayer 5 times a day, perfectly, but I'm hoarding my wealth, I am stingy, and I'm ignoring the hunger of my neighbor, according to this source, have I actually established Salah?
According to the source, absolutely not. In fact, you've done the opposite. Your Salah is invalid because the system is broken. You are performing the symbol, but you are actively destroying the reality that the symbol is supposed to represent.
So the ritual is a symbol for the system.
Yes. The source uses the analogy of a soldier. The morning parade on the military base is a ritual. It's a symbol of discipline, unity, and readiness. But if the soldier does the parade perfectly, shines his boots, marches in perfect time, and then runs away from the battlefield the moment the fighting starts, was the parade meaningful?
Of course not. It was a complete waste of time. He's a deserter.
He's a deserter. The lecture argues it's the same here. The ritual is the parade. The battle is establishing economic justice. Salah is the system of economic justice. The ritual is just the parade meant to instill the discipline needed for that battle. If you do the parade but flee the battle, you are a deserter, not a soldier.
That is a devastating critique of performative religion. It really forces you to look at the difference between what we call religiousness and actual righteousness.
It does.
And this leads us directly into Section 3, because if Salah is fundamentally about economics, we need to talk about how this system actually handles poverty. It's not just about giving handouts.
No, this is one of the most distinctive features of the divine architecture described in the documents. It's the critical concept of rights versus charity.
The term the source uses is haq malum.
The known right. This is so important. The source emphasizes again and again that in this system, aid provided to the needy is not charity. It is not a favor. It is not a handout from a benevolent superior. It is haq malum. It is a legal right codified in the law of the land.
This completely changes the power dynamic, doesn't it? I mean, just think about the psychology of traditional charity. There's a giver who is usually ahir, benevolent, powerful, wealthy, and then there's a receiver who is down there, grateful, desperate, and often humiliated.
Exactly. And the source spends a lot of time analyzing the psychology of dignity, or what it calls sharafi insanyat, the honor of humanity. In a charity model, the receiver often feels shame. They are, in essence, begging. They are completely dependent on the whim mood of the giver. Their hand is the lower hand. But in the system of Salah, the receiver feels no shame. And why would they? Because they're simply claiming their citizenship right.
It's like collecting a pension, maybe, or Social Security.
That's a perfect modern analogy. When you go to collect a pension that you're entitled to, you don't feel humiliated. You don't feel like you need to bow and scrape and kiss the hand of the government clerk.
No, it's yours. You're getting what is yours by law.
Exactly. You contributed to the system, or the system is designed to support you as a citizen, so you take it with your head held high. It is your right. This system applies that same logic to societal welfare.
And what about the giver? The source has a very stern warning for the giver, too.
It does. This is just as radical. The source says the giver must not expect a thank you, not even an internal feeling of gratitude from the receiver. The lecture explicitly warns that if the giver expects gratitude, the entire act is corrupted.
Corrupted how?
It stops being about justice, and it starts being about the giver's ego. It becomes a power trip.
That's a really high bar. Don't even expect a thank you.
It's an incredibly high bar. But it's necessary to protect the sharafi insanyat, the honor of the receiver. If I expect you to be grateful to me, I am implicitly asserting my superiority over you. I am turning you into my subordinate. I am saying, look at me, I am the provider.
I see.
But in the system, God is the ultimate provider and the state is the mechanism of distribution. I, the individual, am just a conduit. The resources in my possession don't truly belong to me in an absolute sense. They belong to the system that sustains us all. If I pass them along to you as per the law, I'm just doing my job as a citizen.
This is so profoundly different from the way we usually see philanthropy today. We love the big donor galas, the ceremonies, the giant checks, the plaques with names on them. This system says, no, anonymous, rights-based, mechanical distribution.
Mechanical is the key word. It removes the volatile human emotions, the pity, the pride, the ego, and replaces it with duty and rights. And that brings us to the engine that drives this entire impartial machine. Section 4, the law of requital, or as the source calls it, mukafat yamal.
Right. This concept of mechanical justice. The source treats it almost like a law of physics, not a law of the courts.
It does. The source argues that the law of requital is fundamentally distinct from human courts. In a human court, you need a judge, you need a prosecutor, you need witnesses, you need evidence. It's a whole process, and it can fail. But the law of requital works automatically. It is self-executing.
The lecture uses a very vivid, very simple analogy here that I think makes it crystal clear. The finger in the fire.
It's a perfect analogy for this concept. It's so simple. If you put your finger in a fire, it burns. Now, does it matter if a police officer standing there watching you do it?
No, of course not.
Does it matter if a court has passed a verdict saying if you touch fire, your finger will burn?
No. The law is irrelevant to the physical reality.
Does it matter if you are a very rich, powerful person with lots of political connections? Does the fire care if you are a king or a pauper?
No. You still get burned.
That is the law of requital. The consequence is inherent in the act itself. The burning isn't a punishment handed down by an angry external judge. It is the natural, unavoidable result of the action. The act is the seed of the consequence.
And the source takes this physical law and applies it directly to society. It says that social crimes work in exactly the same way.
Exactly. You can bribe a human judge to escape a prison sentence for corruption. You can use your connections to get a lawsuit dropped. You can cheat the human system. But you cannot bribe the law of nature.
You can't bribe fire.
You can't bribe fire. And if a society allows hunger to persist while a few hoard immense wealth, the burning is inevitable. It might not happen instantly like the finger in the flame, but it manifests. It manifests as social decay, rising anxiety, rampant crime, political instability, and eventually revolution. That's the social fabric burning.
The source mentions the closed room punishment. I found this really insightful. It talks about the criminal who gets away with it, who escapes the law. Maybe he committed a crime in a closed room where no one saw him, but he still suffers an internal burning.
Yes. The anxiety, the guilt, the paranoia, the constant fear of being found out, the psychological disintegration. The source argues this is the law of requital in action at the individual level. You cannot escape the result of the deed, even if you escape the public consequence. The burning starts the moment the act is committed. The personality distorts. The trust evaporates. That is a real, tangible consequence.
And this connects to a key phrase in the verses we're studying today. Those who are certain they will meet their Rab. Now, usually we interpret meeting the Rab or meeting the Lord as, dying and facing a final judgment in the afterlife. But the expert source interprets this certainty or yaqeen very differently here.
It's a much more immediate interpretation. It interprets yaqeen not just as a belief in a distant afterlife, but as the absolute conviction that every single action is a step toward an inevitable result in this life. Meeting your Lord essentially means facing the full reality and consequences of your actions.
Okay, so it's about meeting the results of your deeds.
Precisely. The person who has this conviction, who knows with the same certainty that putting a finger in fire will burn, that is the person who can uphold the difficult, heavy system of Salah.
Because if you truly, deeply believed that hoarding wealth would literally burn down your society from the inside out, you wouldn't do it.
Exactly. We don't put our hands in fire because we have absolute conviction in the consequence. We hoard wealth because deep down we think we can get away with it. We think the consequence is theoretical or that it can be avoided. We think, maybe I won't get caught. The claim and proof methodology is trying to tell us the consequence is not theoretical. It is as real, as mechanical as fire.
This idea of absolute inevitable consequences brings us to what is probably the most controversial part of the entire lecture. Section 5. The myth of intercession, or shafa.
This is really where the rubber meets the road. Because if the law of requital is mechanical like fire-burning skin, then there is simply no room for someone to step in at the last second and say, hey, fire, don't burn him, he's with me.
Right. And the source is very, very blunt about this. It fundamentally rejects intercession in the traditional popular sense of the word.
It rejects what it calls the Safarish culture. In many societies, and definitely in the South Asian context, the lecture discusses Safarish means nepotism. It means having a connection, an uncle who's a general, or a friend in the ministry who can pull some strings and get you off the hook.
The classic I know a guy defense.
That's it, exactly. And people project this very human, very corrupt system onto God. They think, well, I might be a sinner, I might have hoarded wealth, I might have ignored the poor, but I belong to the right prophet or I follow the right saint, and they will put in a good word for me on Judgment Day.
And the source says, no, that is a dangerous fantasy.
It says absolutely not. The source uses this agricultural analogy that I think is just brilliant. It says, you cannot plant a field full of weeds and then show up at harvest time with a recommendation letter from the governor asking for the crop to come up as wheat.
That's fantastic. It just highlights the complete absurdity of it. Nature doesn't care about your recommendation letter. The soil doesn't care who you know.
The law of requital is absolute. You harvest what you sow. If you plant injustice, you will harvest ruin. No prophet, no saint, no holy intercessor can change the fundamental nature of the crop. The universe, the source argues, does not run on recommendation letters. It runs on immutable laws.
And this connects right back to that beloved nation delusion we talked about in the beginning.
It's the same psychological trap. The source discusses how historically the Jews believed they were God's favorites. And today, many Muslims believe the same thing, that the simple label Muslim acts as an automatic shield.
A get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right. The source argues that a religious label is not a shield against the mechanical consequences of corruption. If a person who calls themselves a believer drinks poison, they die. If a person who calls themselves an atheist drinks wholesome water, they live. The law respects the action, not the label on the actor.
But wait, the term shafa'at is in the Quran. It's there. So does it exist at all? How does the source redefine it if it's not this magical intervention?
It doesn't deny the word exists, but it completely redefines its function. The source explains that the root of shafa'at means to pair, or to make something even as opposed to odd. It implies coupling or joining with something.
Joining? How so?
The source defines shafa'at as standing with someone in support of the truth. Think of a witness in a court who stands with an innocent person to ensure justice is done. That is a form of shafa'at. Or it means cooperating. The word used is ta'awun in a good cause.
I see. So it's not about breaking the law to save your buddy from the consequences. It's about joining forces with others to uphold the law in the first place.
Precisely. It is about upholding the system together. It's not a backdoor to escape justice. It is the collective cooperative effort to establish justice. If I stand with you to feed the poor, that is shafa'at. I am reinforcing your good deed. I am pairing my effort with yours. But I cannot stand with you to protect you from the consequences of your crime. That would be a conspiracy against justice.
That is a profound shift. It takes the focus from who do you know that can save you to what did you do and who did you stand with in the cause of justice.
And that's the core of the argument. It's about personal and collective responsibility.
So we have a mechanical system. We have these inevitable consequences. We have no shortcuts via intercession. This leads to a really important question about us, but human beings. Where do we fit into this? This is Section 6, Human Agency and the Citizenship Contract.
Yes, this is an important question to address. If the law is absolute and mechanical, do we have any free will? Or are we just cogs in a machine?
Right. Is it deterministic?
And the source says, yes, we absolutely have free will. In fact, the source argues that the entire system, the deen, cannot be forced on anyone. Coercion completely invalidates it.
There is no compulsion in religion. We hear that verse quoted a lot.
We do, but the source applies it to the structural societal level. It compares entering this divine system to the modern concept of acquiring citizenship.
The citizenship contract. I really like this analogy. It makes it very concrete.
It does. Think about it. You choose to become a citizen of a country. No one forces you in an ideal sense. You read about the country's constitution, its laws, its values. You make a conscious choice. You sign the papers. You take the oath. That is your ikhtiar, your free will, your choice. You have chosen the system.
Okay, that's the choice part. But once I'm a citizen...
Once you accept the contract, you are bound by the laws of that country. You are bound by its constitution. If you run a red light, you get a ticket. You can't then turn around and say, hey, what about my free will? Why are you oppressing me with this traffic law?
No, because you used your free will to agree to the laws when you became a citizen.
Precisely. The discipline is therefore self-imposed.
Okay, so it's not oppression if you willingly chose the system and its rules.
Exactly. It is self-imposed discipline for the sake of achieving a higher collective goal. And the source links this right back to that metaphor of the mountain pass, the Aqaba. You choose to climb the pass. It's hard, it's exhausting, it requires discipline, but you do it willingly because you want the result. You want the spectacular view from the top, or you want to reach the safe valley on the other side. The discipline of the climb isn't oppression. It's the necessary, freely chosen cost of the achievement.
And the achievement here, the destination, is a just society. A society where no one goes hungry and everyone is free from subjugation.
That is the success and abundance promised in the claim. It's not just about accumulating material wealth. It's about a society that functions in perfect harmony with the divine laws of sociology.
This has been, it's been heavy, but in a good way. In the Kabira sense of the word. I think we should head to the outro and try to summarize this incredible journey we've been on.
Let's do it. It's a lot to process.
Okay, so to recap, we started with the claim and proof. This idea that the Quran presents a logical, historical argument for divine law, not just blind faith. Then we moved to completely redefining Salah, not as a simple habit-formed ritual, but as a heavy, difficult socio-political system, the Aqaba, which demands nothing less than freeing the neck and feeding the hungry.
From there, we saw how that system tackles economics, shifting the entire paradigm from demeaning charity to dignified rights, this concept of haq malum. Then we explored the engine of the whole system, the law of requital, the finger in the fire, where consequences are mechanical, impersonal, and absolutely inevitable.
And building on that, we busted the myth of shafa'at as a get-out-of-jail-free card. No shortcuts. No cosmic nepotism. You can't plant weeds and harvest wheat. You can't use your connections to bribe the fundamental laws of nature.
And finally, we saw that this entire demanding system relies on human agency. It's a citizenship contract we enter willingly, accepting the discipline as a necessary price for building a better, more just world.
The real aha moment for me in all of this is just how much it transforms the entire idea of religion. It takes it out of the private sphere, me and my prayers and my personal salvation, and puts it squarely, unavoidably in the public sphere. It becomes about us and our society.
That is the crucial takeaway. It transforms religious observance from a private hope for personal salvation into a public responsibility for social order. It tells us that the true measure of our spirituality is the economic justice and health of our society.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought. The source left us with this really haunting question, building on that finger in the fire analogy.
It did. It's a powerful one, it asked. If the burning of a single finger in a flame is immediate, visible, and painful, and we learn instantly not to do it, why do we struggle so much to see the burning of social injustice until it's far too late?
The burning of a whole society. The slow rise in crime, the simmering anxiety, the erosion of trust, the eventual collapse. It takes longer to manifest. It's a slower burn. But the source is arguing that it is just as real and just as inevitable.
It really challenges the listener and us to look at the headlines. Look at the world around you. Don't look for divine punishments falling from the sky. Look for the law of requital operating in the quiet cause and effect of our daily social and economic choices. Look for the smoke before the fire consumes the entire house.
That is a lot to mull over. We hope this deep dive gave you a completely new lens through which to look at these ancient verses and their modern implications.
It's always fascinating and a little unsettling to see how relevant these old laws are to our most pressing modern problems.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.